Welcome to Faith on Film with Isaac Hernandez and Holly McClure, keeping you informed on faith and family entertainment.
Hi, Holly. How you doing today?
Doing great, and I'm excited about this show today.
Well, we're always excited about our shows, aren't we?
Especially about this one.
It's because we have exciting shows. But yes, today is especially interesting to me because we have somebody who's really a mover and a shaker. And, you know, there's so much going on right now in the world of Christian films, isn't there?
There is. And really, in the world, period. I mean, look what's happened with The Chosen. Look at how they broke records with their theatrical, releases of season 3. Look what's happening with Asbury and how that's going on. And, Isaac, I keep thinking of this song, the Beatles song, You Say You Want a Revolution. Well, we're going to change the world. I feel like this is the Jesus revolution, and it's going to change the world.
Yes, it is. And since you brought up a song, I have a song also, and that's not from the Beatles, but it's from Andre Crouch. And it was a song that I used to love called Take Me Back. And the film we're going to talk about today is, of course, a true story.
Yes.
It happened back in 1969, which was when I was about 10 years old. So I grew up in that. So this film has taken me back to that place where, how does the song go? Take me back to the place where I first believed.
Yes. And I'm so excited because the guest we have today is it's a brother duo, but we've got one of the brothers, and they're friends who I've known for years. I know you've known for years. They're partners. They have an amazing production company, The Kingdom Story, which has released so many films I can only imagine, and I Believe, and all these other great films. And yet another one today we're going to talk about.
Yes, we are. We're, of course, talking about John Irwin, the director of Jesus Revolution.
Yes.
Which is one of the hottest faith-based movies out there right now.
It's breaking records. It really is.
Before we get to John, let's take a look at the trailer for Jesus.
This house has a very good vibe. There is an entire generation searching.
Slow down, man, slow down.
Just in all the wrong places. If you want to reach my people, you need to speak to them in a language they understand.
If I bring them in, I'm going to lose my job.
We can only walk through doors open to us. In your church, that's a door that's shut.
You've probably noticed we have some guests here today. I'd like you to meet my new friends. Welcome.
They don't belong here. Half of them aren't even wearing shoes. They're staining the new shag carpet.
They need our help. If you feel like you're misunderstood and judged, you will find forgiveness and freedom right here.
That was awesome.
Now that door is open any time of day. And if there are some who don't like that, well then that door works both ways.
All right, Pastor, let's begin.
I was almost done with this, but then you did what nobody else would even dare.
This thing that we found, I feel like I belong.
You're gonna need a bigger church.
Our country is a dark and divided place, but now there's hope, and it's spreading.
This is your home, and I want you to tell all your friends about it.
Hey, John, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Welcome to Faith on Film. Okay, Isaac and I love this. First of all, we saw it at a conference last fall, but then I went ahead and went to the movie theater and saw it again because I wanted to see it after all the bells and whistles and everything was done. And I got to tell you that I lived in Newport Beach for almost 30 years. So I used to take my kids down to Pirate Cove, and they climbed all over those rocks and played on those beaches. And I went to Calvary Chapel in New Chuck and interviewed Greg Laurie. So I had such a heart for this story when you guys first announced it, and it was very exciting. What inspired you to do this story?
Well, it was the Time magazine. This was the original magazine that I bought. I bought this magazine 7 years ago.
Wow.
In 2015. It's old, it's tattered. I was researching another movie that was in the same time period, and I had I had no idea really of the far-reaching effects of the Jesus movement, and so I bought this magazine. I began to read it, and I was blown away. First of all, this magazine was 4 or 5 years after the first Time magazine with no picture on the cover. It was just a black background, and it said, "Is God dead?" And 4 or 5 years later, Jesus is on the cover of Time, and it said the Jesus Revolution. And I read this article. I mean, it's like a 10-page spread, and it was buoyant, and it was hopeful, and it was optimistic, and there were all these pictures in there of Pirates Cove and of this movement, and film to film. I've never worked this long on a movie, but between every film, I can only imagine, I Still Believe, American Underdog, I just wanted to get Jesus Revolution made. So to see God's hand in the timing of all this is staggering to me. I just can't believe the timing of the release. And that led to my relationship with Greg Laurie. I met him way back then, and we began to dream of doing this film together. And so it's amazing that it's finally out and that it's coming out at such a perfect time.
I mean, talk about Asbury the week before or 2 weeks before was Asbury. And then everyone was already talking about, wow, this revival thing. And then the movie comes out. I mean, God couldn't have planned it. And I know it's not like you guys went, we'll open it 2 weeks later. I mean, you did this months ago,
we've been working on the film for 7 years. We filmed it. We tried to film it. COVID shut it down. We finally got it where we could remount the project, where we could bring extras on the set again, because that was so essential to the story. And we got to make it. And I remember having this conversation with Dallas Jenkins. I'm like, there was no committee meeting where we was like, okay, Dallas, you do The Chosen in the first week of February and the Walking on the Water, and then make sure some Super Bowl commercials are bought that mention the name of Jesus, and then we'll anchor the end of the month, and we'll have a revival in between, and it'll just be the month of Jesus in pop culture. That meeting never happened. This was just something that God just did, and it was this incredible thing. You just feel like, well, I guess what revivals feel like, that you're just a part of something bigger. And it was so amazing to see all that God did with the film. And when the Asbury revival happened, my wife and I was working on a film in Louisville, Kentucky, so not very far away. So we thought, well, heck, let's drive over. It was day 2. And so we drove over on day 3, and you could still just walk in. And it was amazing. And just listening to what God is doing in a generation was incredible. And I loved it. And Greg Laurie called me and he said, "You're the first person that's been there. What did it feel like?" And I'm like, and I told him, I said, it felt just like the movie. It felt just like scenes from the movie. And so I just think God is doing something unique in our time. And the whole thing that drew me to the movie is the more I read about the late 60s and that generation, the more it just felt like today. It was a time of desperation. And I just think that we're back there. And I think that's why we're experiencing this sudden hunger, this sudden spiritual hunger in America.
Yeah,
I do too. And one more thing before Isaac, before you get to your question, I felt it also profound that after Sam Smith did his satanic thing at the Grammys, and that, kind of captured attention, I love that it was blown out and blown away by everything that happened this last week.
I saw a meme online that made that distinction of like, this happened a week before, and then this revival at Asbury happened. And I'm just glad to see, typically you don't see, Jesus over the airwaves a lot, and this has just been an extraordinary season. And last month was such an unprecedented time, and it was good to join efforts. And I just think that it might seem like a cliche, but Jesus was the answer then; He's the answer now. And if a Jesus Revolution rescued us from our despair then, it can again today. And so it's wonderful to be a part of that.
You didn't start off doing these kind of movies. In fact, you originally you started your career as a sports. You're doing sports, working for ESPN, I believe it was.
Right. That's right.
And then you went from there. Yep. Then you went from there to doing music videos. And then when I met you was when you started doing documentaries, I guess, because you did a documentary called about the Twin Towers. What was it? Miracle?
Oh, the Crossing the Towers. That was the first long-form piece of content Andy and I ever did. That was in 2006.
And that's when I met you guys. And then you went on to making these full feature films. And your last few have actually been basically biopics. Is this a new trend for you guys? That this is what you're going to continue doing, biopics? Or what's next for you?
Well, I say this. There's a lot coming, and we're grateful. I'm telling you, there is an uprising on behalf of Christianity in the entertainment industry in Hollywood, and it's wonderful to be a part of it. And I think we're just getting started. And the more the audience supports the work, the more we can make. Your movie ticket really is like your vote, and so I'm excited about it. But I think that they say a filmmaker finds their story and tells it over and over again. And I think starting with the movie Woodlawn, certainly with documentaries like The Cross and the Towers, even before that, we just learned the power of telling true stories. And there's something powerful about the truth, because when a story really happened, you're like, man, if this happened to that person, maybe it can happen to me. If this happened to that family, maybe it can happen to me. And so I think that there's an added power to true stories. And we just fell in love with that with Woodlawn. And we've done true stories ever since. I'm sure we'll do many other types of content. But I just really love adapting a true story because people instantly apply it to their lives in a much more powerful way because it's real and it really happened. And that's one of the things I love about Jesus Revolution is, if God used a bunch of normal people back then to do something extraordinary, maybe despite my flaws and failings and all the ways in which I don't feel qualified, maybe God can use me in an extraordinary way as well. I know I feel like that when I watch the movie, and that's what I hope other people feel as well.
With Kelsey Grammer and Jonathan, and I mean, talk about casting and talk about getting someone like Jonathan at a time where he is at the top. And then I've seen Kelsey Grammer on these talk shows saying he was thinking, God, what can I do in my life? And then the next day the script arrived. So this God's hand is all over this movie, but especially with those two. Talk about casting those and how it was working with them.
I mean, God's hand is all over the movie, and God's timing is just perfect. And when we were able to remake them, again, the movie got shut down during COVID just before we were going to film, and different cast, and John Gunn, my co-writer, was going to direct it, and we had to wait a long time for this movie because we had to wait till all the unions would let us use extras again, in crowds of people because it was so essential to the story. Like when we made the movie American Underdog before this one, all those crowds are fake, because we weren't allowed to have people there. And so couldn't really do that with this film, with all the baptisms and whatnot. So when I was able to step in and co-direct it with Brent McCorkle, and it's just been such a passion project for so many years. And so when we started again, I had a list of one, and it was Kelsey Grammer for Chuck Smith. I just feel like when you can be Frasier and play Macbeth, that is range for an actor. And he's just one of the most sincere, wonderful guys I've ever met. And so we sent him the script, and he was having what he calls sort of a crisis of meaning. He wanted to do something that was meaningful. And the script came in the next day, and he felt like it was a sign from God to do the project. And Jonathan is I think, amazing in that show. He's an incredible actor, but he's an even better person and absolutely dedicated to his faith and dedicated to role. And the two of them together, every scene that they're in together really reminded me very much of when I first asked Greg Laurie about the two of them when I was doing the research. And he said, when Chuck Smith partnered with Lonnie Frisbee, it was like nitro meeting glycerin. And I feel the same is true for those two actors. They are so good together, and they crushed it, as did the rest of the cast. I think that I'm just so proud of the team, of Brent McCorkle, my co-director, and of every single performance in the film. I think there's just an incredible level of authenticity to the movie, and I love the performances in this film. Kimberly Williams-Paisley's amazing. Devon Franklin's amazing. I mean, it's a wonderful cast.
And it was fun to see the early story of Greg and Kathy, because I remember the early days of when Greg started out actually doing Harvest Crusade, because I was going to Chuck Smith's church before, just as Greg was kind of getting Harvest going, it was big, and then when he got that going with Harvest Crusades, I did remotes for KKLA. I was there doing remotes and stuff and got to know him then. But to see their beginning story and how the backgrounds that they came from, a lot of people don't know that either. And I felt that really also reached out to the younger generation. So you kind of of reached every level of generation, kind of class in this movie.
I'm so glad to hear you say that. We actually designed them that way. It's very intentional because I feel, I'm a dad. I have 4 kids. Beth and I do, and our oldest, Kate, is 14. God help me, I have a teenager. And you just feel like a lot of times screens, it didn't used to be this way, but now screens rip our families apart more than they bring our families together. And sometimes you just feel, what can we all watch together? And so it's very important in how we make the movies. We like to make movies that are intentionally multi-generational. And so when people watch Jesus Revolution, like I was watching it at the premiere with my wife Beth and I were there, and we had Kate with us, our daughter, and then my parents were there. And so there's 3 generations of Irwins, as with my brother and his family, and all loving the movie for different reasons. And that's so important. The thing that I love the most is when the generation that lived this movement takes their grandkids or a youth group or something, and you just sense this passing of the baton, and a generation that can live this movement again. And so what I love is teenagers love this movie because of the love story between Greg and Kathy. Joel Courtney and his history with the Kissing Booth movies on Netflix certainly doesn't hurt. My daughter was geeking out with him, but he's a wonderful guy and a strong believer. But it was just this wonderful love story in the midst of this movement. And Greg and Kathy are going on 50 years right now, which is such a beautiful thing that's the year that this movie came out. And they're wonderful people. I love them dearly. I always call Greg like the last Jedi, like he's the last guy that can get, 100,000 people into a stadium and preach Billy Graham style. But also he and Kathy are just some of the most genuine, wonderful people that I know, and I think that I wanted that story reflected, and I'm so grateful for his friendship and his partnership on this film.
I'm going to ask you a question that I kind of struggled at first whether I should even ask it or not, but I just feel it's actually important to hear what your thought is on this, and so I do apologize if it makes you uncomfortable, but I'm
super curious.
No,
go for it.
I've come to realize that there's always Christian people, who will come against a Christian movie because somehow it doesn't fit their narrative. And it happened to this movie. I go through my Facebook a lot, and I saw this guy post something horrible about Jesus Revolution. He said, it's okay to say, hey, I didn't like the movie because, I don't like long-haired people, or I didn't like the music or whatever. This guy said, don't watch this movie because it's satanic. And I'm going to tell you, my blood rose up. And I normally don't get involved in Facebook bickering, but I was just so angry, I probably shouldn't have.
That's funny.
I just felt so angry, and I commented, and I said, you know what? Jesus himself could have been in this movie, and you would have said it was satanic. How sad your life must be. But then I realized, these things come. How do you feel about comments like that? Or do you just not even read comments because you don't even want to be, you don't even want to hear these?
I read them all.
Thank goodness there's many more that say wonderful things about the movie.
Of course.
Thank goodness it's been developed.
Yeah, I mean,
there's always Pharisees.
But I love the question, and there's a couple ways to discuss the question. First of all, I knew when making this movie that this movie would stir conversations, and that's exactly what needs to happen and what we wanted. I also find it interesting that people experiencing the movie, whether it's critics or whether it's the people, of course, I'm grateful that the movie received an A+ cinema score and is 99% on Rotten Tomatoes, and overwhelmingly, people love the movie and love to watch the movie, but I knew that the movie was going to be a lot like the movement itself. And I remember Greg Laurie said to me with the Jesus movement, he said, people whose hearts were open to it and open to what God was doing, even though it was confounding. I mean, at the time, there was a perception that, you don't let hippies into church. Their path into church is to get a job, go home, get a haircut, take a bath, then maybe they can come to church. And yet this is where God was working, and Chuck threw his doors open to it. And so there was a part of the church that did not embrace it, and that part of the church did not experience what God was doing. And so I think that's the same way today. I challenge people in doing these interviews, step outside of cynicism and doubt and look around at what God is doing, even if it's in an unlikely place, and you'll experience it. If you want, you can find flaws in anything. George Lucas said films are never complete, they're only abandoned. So certainly there's flaws in the work. But if you're open to what God is doing, you're open to experiencing it. And that really is, even amongst the critics. And I was shocked that it's actually a fresh rating on Rotten Tomatoes. I was prepared for far worse because I knew the movie would divide. But I just think even amongst the critics, those that embrace it, there was what's his name? He's with the Independent critic, and he said, Jesus Revolution will make you laugh and cry, and it'll call you out and it'll call you back, and I'm like, man, that's a critic saying that. And I'll also say this, one of the things that I really was passionate about portraying, the Jesus Revolution was not perfect, and it was messy, and there's not a perfect character in this story. And I think it was a bunch of normal, flawed people that God used in extraordinary ways at an extraordinary time.
Yep.
And I was very passionate about writing history a little bit and making sure that Lonnie Frisbee was included as a character and given his due as one of the sparks that lit the flame that was the Jesus Revolution. Certainly, he had many struggles in his life, and he had many wounds, and those wounds manifested in some ways that, frankly, eventually took his life. He died of AIDS in 1993.
Yeah.
He died in repentance. He died writing some powerful memoirs that are now bestsellers on Amazon suddenly over the weekend in their category, which I thought was interesting and great because he said many profound things in his memoirs. But much later on in the story, he had what he described as a falling away, and he had many struggles in the 80s. That wasn't our story to tell.
Right.
But it also is not right to exclude him from the history of this movement, which had been done in many books. And I wanted to write history a little bit that way. And I also wanted to make a definitive statement that God uses people that struggle. And I'm one of them, and I think so many of us believe the lie that I'm either disqualified or unqualified to be used by God. So you have an enormous amount of Christians that are sitting on the sidelines of Christianity instead of getting in the game and being used by God because they think I'm not talented enough. I've done this or that. I struggle with this or that. So I wanted to tell a story, and I knew that there were some people that would not agree with this, and that's okay. But I wanted to tell a story that, God can use anybody in extraordinary ways, including me. There are consequences to decisions in life. Yeah. But uselessness is never one of them, and I wanted to make sure that was clear. And frankly, some people don't like that, but that's just what I believe. And by the way, I tell true stories for a living, and this is the truth. This is the truth of how God moved in our country 50 years ago.
Thank you, John, for your time, and thank you for what you did. And God bless you and your brother for your desire, and Kevin Downs and others that we love that are part of it for Kingdom Story, for getting these stories out and making these movies. God bless you and everything you do. Thanks, Holly. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you so much.
My name's Kelsey Grammer. I'm playing Chuck Smith in Jesus Revolution. I wanted to do something that meant something. It's almost in a minor despair about doing something of value. Does it matter? And then this script was delivered to me the next day. Okay, here we go. He's a man sort of at a loss. He doesn't really know where he's going and how his church is going to fare and whether or not he's even going to remain a preacher. And then this opportunity presents itself to him.
Lonnie was this roving hippie evangelist, and when Chuck and Lonnie came together, it was like nitro met glycerin.
This kid walks and he thinks, I'm going to open up the church to this. And it's a pretty amazing thing. My stars.
Hi, Chuck Smith.
My name is Jonathan Rumi. I'm playing Lonnie Frisbee, the hippie street preacher who preached alongside Pastor Chuck Smith. I've never read a script that had a character that was like this. It was just so beautiful to play somebody that had these human weaknesses and flaws, but who was so profoundly gifted in being able to inspire people just by speaking his heart to them.
And if God can heal me, He can heal anyone.
The dynamite in their relationship was in many ways the origin of a nationwide revolution. What I love about the movie version of it is that Kelsey Grammer and Jonathan Roumie have very much the same dynamic. It is very much like nitro meeting glycerin. They fully committed to the role and to the story and to the cause of why we're doing this, and that just leaps off the screen.
I think it'll challenge people's notions of the need to be perfect to be a Christian.
I hope people feel tearful and joyful all at the same time, and maybe inspired to rediscover their own faith.
If you look with love, you'll see an entire generation searching for all the right things, just in all the wrong places. What would it take for you, Chuck Smith, to be desperate?
This is God's Word! Let's open it together.
You know, Isaac, I love coming out of that. I mean, he said so many things that I love, but one of the things that I just remember, and I'm going to be telling other people because it was so important, was that, you know, looking at what he said when he sat down with Dallas Jenkins and they were talking about, wow, all the things that came together. First of all, you don't book a studio like the week before. You book it a year before. Your people do. You don't know when you're releasing a film that other films are going to be released necessarily or what's going on. They were talking about The Chosen. They were talking about the, you know, Asbury. They were talking about how everything came together. How? Because God orchestrated it. And truly, I believe when Sam Smith came out, was it Smith, with his devil thing at the Grammy, and Satan thought he was making such a statement. And then right after Asbury and right after, bam, Chosen. And it's like he cannot trump God. I just love how how he talked about that.
And you see, God already knew all this because he started this whole process from way before. It's just that now at this point he said, okay, time to release my spirit upon all flesh.
Right.
And there it came. So yeah, it's very exciting times we're in.
And for people who say, oh, movies, you know, they're so bad, and you know, look what Hollywood and look what movies, folks, look what The Chosen has done. Look how it's reached millions and millions in many countries that we could never have done in one theater or two theaters. Look what Jesus Revolution has done. Look what how God is using media. Yes. God's using film, television, his media, music. He's using it to bring in the young people in and to witness. It's the parable of modern days. So, you know, for all the negative things, there's a lot of positive.
Yes, absolutely. And you know what? The devil's been using this for a long time, and the church has just kind of stayed away from it. And I'm glad that the church is coming back now and saying, you know what? Wait a minute. What a great tool to reach our culture.
What a great tool. I am so excited to see what John and his brother Andrew, what they're going to be doing in the future with their partner Kevin Downs, who we also know, and what they're going to be doing with other films, because he gave us a hint and said he's got something coming up. So I can't wait to interview him for that one.
Yes, he did. Well, that's it for today, Holly.
Another great show, Isaac. Always good. And remember, folks, choose your movies wisely.
Write to us at faithonfilmtv@gmail.com. That's faithonfilmtv@gmail.com. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Faith on Film TV. Also, go to our YouTube channel, Faith on Film TV, and hit the subscribe button and the bell for notifications on our latest Faith on Film shows.